Everyone thinks they know who Hades is. The villain, the god of death, the dark one that the other gods feared and mortals refused to name. But here's what the myths buried under centuries of mistranslation and Hollywood rewrites. Hades never started a war, never destroyed a civilization out of wounded pride, never punished someone who didn't deserve it. In a pantheon full of gods who raped, manipulated, and burned the world around them for sport, Hades was the only one who consistently followed the rules. The most feared god in all of Greek mythology was also the most just. And the reason he ended up ruling the dead wasn't punishment. It wasn't exile. It was a coin flip, a cosmic lottery that could have gone any other way. But to understand how he got there, you have to start before the underworld existed at all. You have to start inside his father's stomach. Before Hades was a god, he was a prisoner. His father was Cronos, the Titan king who ruled the universe and devoured his own children because a prophecy had told him one of them would destroy him. You already know that story. What you might not have stopped to think about is what it actually meant for the children inside. Not dead, not unconscious, alive, fully aware, trapped in total darkness inside a divine body, unable to move, unable to speak, unable to do anything except exist and wait. No light, no sound except the slow, rhythmic beat of a titan's heart. No sense of time passing at all. Just an endless, suffocating dark that had no beginning and no end. And this wasn't for days. Some accounts place it at years, decades. Hestia went in first, then Demeter, then Hera, then Poseidon, then Hades. 5 gods who spent what should have been their childhoods imprisoned in the body of their own father. When Zeus finally freed them by forcing Cronos to vomit them back up, they didn't emerge as children. They emerged as fully formed gods who had never once seen the sun. And Hades, the last of the 5, stepped out of that darkness and into a world he had never seen, carrying inside him something none of the others quite had, an absolute, unshakable calm. When you have survived that, nothing frightens you anymore. When you have lived in complete darkness for that long, the underworld isn't a punishment. It's familiar. But before the underworld, there was a war. The Titanomachy lasted 10 years, a decade of the universe destroying itself from the inside. The Titans held Mount Othrys. The Olympians held Mount Olympus. Both sides hurled mountains at each other. The seas boiled. The earth cracked open. And Hades fought in it, but not the way Zeus did. Not from the sky, not with lightning. From the shadows. The Cyclopes, freed from Tartarus by Zeus, gave each brother a weapon. Zeus received the thunderbolt. Poseidon received the trident. And Hades received a helmet. The Helm of Darkness. Whoever wore it became completely invisible. Not hidden in shadow, not camouflaged, erased from existence entirely. No god, no titan, no living thing could see, hear, or sense the wearer in any way. Hades used it to infiltrate the Titan stronghold. He moved through their defenses unseen, destroyed their weapons and supply lines from within, and destabilized their entire war effort without a single enemy knowing he was there. The war was won partly because of him, and when it was finally over, it was time to divide what they had conquered. Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades each drew lots. Zeus drew the sky, Poseidon drew the sea, and Hades drew the underworld. Most people hear that and assume it was a punishment, that Hades lost, that he was sent to rule the dead because his brothers didn't want him near the living. But that's not what happened. It was a random draw. He simply pulled the wrong lot. No conspiracy, no exile, just chance. And the underworld he inherited wasn't a pit of suffering. It was a kingdom with its own geography, its own rivers, its own distinct regions. The Styx ran along its outer boundary, the river across which the dead were ferried. The Lethe ran through it, the river of oblivion whose waters stripped all memory from souls preparing for rebirth. The Phlegethon, a river of fire that burned eternally without consuming. Fields of asphodel where ordinary souls wandered in a gray, emotionless peace. The Elysian fields where heroes rested in eternal light. And beneath everything, Tartarus, where the truly wicked suffered punishments that had been designed specifically for them. Hades didn't build this system. He inherited it and maintained it with total consistency. And that consistency was the thing that separated him from every other Olympian. Every soul that died arrived at his gates eventually, and Hades judged them through 3 magistrates, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus, former mortal kings renowned in life for their fairness. Together they evaluated every soul not by their status, not by who they had prayed to or how powerful they had been in life, but purely by what they had done. No exceptions, no bribes, no divine favoritism, not even for the children of Zeus. When Orpheus descended to retrieve his dead wife Eurydice, playing music so beautiful it moved the stones themselves, something happened that had never happened before in the entire history of the Underworld. The souls in the asphodel fields stopped wandering. The judges stopped judging. Even the damned in Tartarus paused their eternal suffering for a moment just to listen. And Hades, the most feared god in mythology, sat on his throne and wept. Not from sadness, from recognition, from the weight of hearing grief expressed so perfectly that even a god who had ruled the dead for millennia felt it in whatever passed for his chest. He gave Orpheus something unprecedented, a chance no mortal had ever been given and none would ever receive again. Walk back to the living world. Don't look back. Trust that she's following. Orpheus walked. Eurydice followed. They were almost there, almost at the boundary between death and life. And then, in the final seconds, Orpheus looked back. Whether from doubt, from love, from the unbearable human need to confirm what you desperately want to be true, nobody knows. He looked, and Eurydice was pulled back into the dark. Hades had given him everything. The rest was his own undoing. When Sisyphus, the mortal king who had cheated death twice through manipulation and cunning, was finally delivered to the underworld, Hades gave him a punishment that matched the crime with perfect, almost poetic precision. Roll a boulder up a hill for eternity. Watch it roll back down every time you near the top. A punishment entirely about futility, handed to a man whose entire life had been dedicated to outwitting the inevitable. Sisyphus had believed he was smarter than the natural order. His eternity would be spent learning he was wrong, over and over, forever. When Hercules descended to capture Cerberus as his final labor, Hades didn't rage, didn't fight, didn't send armies of the dead to stop him. He appeared before Hercules directly and offered a deal. One condition: no weapons. If you can subdue him with your bare hands alone, he's yours. Hercules succeeded, and Hades, without argument, without resentment, honored the agreement immediately and completely. That is not a villain. That is a ruler with a code. Here's the darkest irony of Hades' existence. He was one of the most powerful gods in the entire pantheon. His helmet made him invisible. His kingdom contained every soul that had ever lived. He was literally inescapable because everyone ends up in his realm eventually. And yet almost no one built temples for him. Almost no one prayed to him. Because humans are superstitious. They believed that speaking his name brought death closer. That acknowledging him was an invitation for him to notice you. So they called him Platon instead, the wealthy one, a reference to the minerals buried beneath the earth, his domain. Anything to avoid speaking his actual name. Hades was the god that every living thing would eventually need and that no one wanted to acknowledge. He ruled in absolute silence while his brothers held festivals and received prayers and were sung about across the ancient world. Just an endless procession of the dead arriving at his gates, and a king who received each one with the same impartial, unwavering judgment. And then, in the middle of all that silence, something happened that even the gods didn't see coming. One day, a young goddess was picking flowers in a meadow, daughter of Demeter, goddess of the harvest, beloved by everyone who knew her, and Hades, who had ruled alone for longer than most civilizations have existed, saw her. What happened next triggered a conflict that almost destroyed the world. Demeter's grief was so complete that she abandoned her duties entirely. Crops died, fields turned to dust, humans began starving by the thousands. The gods themselves panicked and begged Zeus to intervene, and at the center of it all was a pomegranate, 6 seeds, and a choice that couldn't be undone. The full story of Persephone, the goddess who became queen of the dead, and what that actually meant for both of them, drops next. Follow the channel so you don't miss it. Hades didn't ask to rule the dead. He drew the wrong lot and accepted it without complaint. He fought a 10-year war from the shadows and asked for nothing. He governed with more integrity than any god on Olympus and received almost nothing in exchange. And history remembered him as the villain. That's the dark truth about Hades. The god everyone feared was the only one worth trusting. The darkest kingdom in mythology was the only place where the rules were always followed. Welcome to Keros Mythos.